Then I have no choice.
Die, Batosai!
Over here!
Oh my god, I can't believe it! He didn't kill anybody! Everybody's just knocked out!
Back at the release of Monster Hunter World Iceborne, I had a vision come to me in the night. A world where longsword was no longer only a sharp weapon, but a blunt one as well. One where you could truly take advantage of the special sheath mechanic and the attacks that it led into. That build was fantastic fun, but not hugely strong. I called it Slug Punishment, and it was one of my favorite creations. It changed and evolved through the rest of the DLC releases for the game, and it actually became significantly stronger as it went. But none of those builds, not one of them, were as good at what they do as this one is today. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Monster Hunter Rise has improved all aspects of Longsword's draw-based gameplay, to the point that it is a main staple of the regular damage sets too. But what if you focused upon it? Not only boosting the damage of those specific attacks, but more importantly giving yourself the power to create massive downtime in the hunt by getting a stun. What about 2 stuns? That's right, of course I have my little pet buddies using blunt weapons as well, so I don't know quite how much that helps, but 2 stuns in a hunt as short as this thing gets is quite impressive, and you can get 2 stuns consistently against anything with a somewhat weak head and with good enough aim and timing. Even a Diablos can be stunned twice in a 6-minute hunt because of how low the angle of attack is. You hit his soft chin instead of his hard horns. Now that I've done my best to explain why you would want to use this build, let's talk about what is actually part of it. And if you just want to skip to the full completed thing with the skill list, you can go to the time on screen, but I will be going through a bit of an explanation of why we chose what we do. As for the weapon, then, playing Longsword in Rise, if you are not going with elements specifically, which in this build we're not, the undeniably strongest option is the Nargacuga Longsword Deepest Night. For anyone wanting a damage calculation of the weapon to compare to other options that you've maybe seen, you take the attack 3 ramp up for 8 raw, then 188 raw multiplied by 1.32 because the weapon has white sharpness, then 40% affinity is the equivalent of 40% of 25% damage, as a critical hit is a 25% damage bonus by default, so just straight up 10% increase for a final number of 272.9, which is a particularly high number for just a pure weapon by itself. The Nargacuga Longsword is very good. As far as the actual build, there are 2 skills that we focused above all else, as I consider them to be integral to the personality of the build. The first is Punishing Draw. This skill adds a stun effect and a small attack bonus to every draw attack that you do, including attacks from your special sheath position. Each rank of this skill increases both effects, so hitting level 3 of this was just absolutely mandatory. Then there is the new, almost mandatory skill for all Longsword builds, Quick Sheath. This skill isn't new, but how important it is to Longsword sort of is. It was still good in Iceborne because of your special sheath being added, but now in Monster Hunter Rise, Quick Sheath is just lightning fast, which is insanely good for all Longsword builds. Tertiarily, if the space could be found, was Slugger. Or more specifically, the first rank of Slugger at least. Slugger increases your stun power, but very uniquely, the first rank of Slugger is stronger than either of the next 2, even combined, being worth a bonus of 20% stun power by itself. So finding space for that one rank in a build like this seemed a necessity, honestly. Past this, it just breaks down to regular damage skills, by which I mean skills that aren't attack in this case, as because of how the math works for this all, the version of this build which goes full crit boost is a small amount stronger than the version that ignores crit boost for a 6 out of 7 attack boost. So the crit boost version of this build is what we are showing you today. Without further ado, here is the build itself in all of its glory. The Nargacuga weapon with the attack 3 ramp up, Zinogre helmet, Barioth chest and gloves, Rajang waist and legs, 1 punishing draw decoration, 1 sheath decoration, 1 slugger decoration, 3 speed sharpening decorations, and then 1 diversion decoration for a little bit of extra bop. With this set, you have 2 more empty 1 slots to do as you will. I chose stun resistance personally. My talisman is 1 weakness exploit, 2 punishing draw, no slots, but you can achieve the exact same set with something like 1 weakness exploit, 1 punishing draw in a 2 slot, 1 weakness exploit, 1 slugger in a 2 slot, or even just a straight up 2 weakness exploit talisman. If your best talisman is a weakness exploit with a single 2 slot, which is a slightly more common and much more achievable build, you can do this exact same thing, but without the Slugger jewel, and you'll still get your 1 stun per hunt. 2 stuns will be a bit less consistent, but 1 stun all the time. Altogether then, the skills of this are 3 critical boost for a total of 15% increased damage on our critical strikes, 3 maximum might for 30% affinity that can be active the majority of the time with this build, as you parry a lot more often than you roll, 3 punishing draw, 3 quick sheath, 3 speed sharpening to keep you in white sharpness a little bit easier, 2 weakness exploit for 30% affinity against monster weak parts, 2 latent power, 1 critical eye for 5% unfortunately unnecessary affinity on the top, 1 slugger, heroics as a bonus, and diversion, which makes the monster have a higher chance of targeting you over any other targets, including your buddies in solo hunts. And then of course you've got the 2 remaining 1 slots to do with as you please. It helps that this build actually looks pretty damn sweet too if you just dye the Rajang armor white and the Barioth armor that golden yellow. As for the playstyle, that is where this gets a bit more interesting, because while the draw attacks have become a pretty standard part of longsword gameplay in Monster Hunter Rise, you do want to favor them slightly more than usual even with this build because of Punishing Draw. Punishing Draw's damage bonus isn't massive, but it does exist, and it quite literally shifts the value of those attacks compared to other attacks. In other words, while your main goal while the monster is active is parrying every attack that you physically can, one of your strongest combos, if you're just given the time to just spam attacks at it, is just using your draw attacks in various ways. The EI counter is a very strong singular tick of damage even if the counter itself doesn't happen, so don't be afraid to use it as a movement tool or a way to snipe a particularly weak monster part if the situation arises. The EI slash does quite a lot of damage in this build, partially because of how fast you can combo it with full quick sheath, but while this is more spammable, it is slightly weaker than its bigger brother, the drawn double slash. The first switch skill of the longsword I recommend that you bring with this build. It is just sort of built for it, honestly. I don't think that there is a style of longsword I can imagine not using this switch skill with, as it's just that good, but more so than most, this build actually boosts the power of this attack, giving it even more damage and the nice stun value. You can also use the first hit of your spirit combo as a draw attack, and the same if you start your spirit combo from a midair position. They all count as draw attacks and get these bonuses. The one unfortunate report that I have to make here though is that the extra parts of the EI counter are not affected by punishing draw, only the initial hit, as in the hits that you get for a successful counter don't have that effect. Therefore, while the EI counter is stronger with punishing draw as the first and biggest individual hit of the attack is affected by it, the fact that most of it isn't is sort of sad. For your second switch skill, I take Spirit Reckoning combo for the extra damage and versatility in your combos. However, both are viable, and this one is more of a personal preference choice, potentially even dependent on the monster that you are fighting and the angles of attack that you would like to have. The third switch skill is where some people might look at me weird, but I don't care. I love it. For this build, Silkbind Sakura Slash over Soaring Kick. Yes, you can use Soaring Kick if you just prefer it. There is no downside to using Soaring Kick with this build. Helmbreaker is still Helmbreaker, and you don't focus on crit draw, so it still has full crit benefits of the rest of the build. It is still great, but if you are getting into what this build is, into the theme of this build, into feeling like the sword user that this build represents, the stylishness of it all, the correct answer is Sakura Slash. The damage is lower if you compare them one-to-one dead on, but there are a lot of other factors to consider as well. Sakura Slash is a free level up, which is useful. On top of that, it doesn't cost a level up, which is a bonus. And then what I think is both most important and least talked about, it combos well. It specifically puts you into a perfect sheathed position that you can cancel with a special sheath. But no matter which way you do it, you end sheathed in some fashion. And how could you not take that as a sign to use it with this build? As such, Sakura Slash in this build is not only a way to level up and significant damage burst, it is a fantastic movement option that combos into what our strongest moves are in this build as well, allowing you to keep up the relentless offense that Longsword is now known for. All this to say, yeah, you can use Helmbreaker if you want, but the cool kids use Sakura Slash, just saying. And that's more or less all of the important things. It's worth mentioning when I run this in solo hunts, I go with my Palico and Palamute using the blunt sleep weapons, which I believe to be the strongest setup for this considering the very unique tech move of the wake up combo that Longsword has, able to trigger Serene Pose with a barrel bomb explosion and continue its combo. And then one final note, in Monster Hunter Rise you can actually combo a successful EI counter into EI counter. That's right, if you successfully hit the EI counter, you can immediately combo that back into the special sheathed position to launch another counter instantly. Usually attacks don't quite come from the monster fast enough for that to actually work, but it is another very interesting little note that specifically affects this playstyle, as draw attacks are just so strong. That's everything. Build complete. This works in multiplayer too, but obviously even with the diversion skill, the more targets that the monster has, the less frequently you will be chosen to be attacked, and thus less often you'll be able to parry. So this thing really properly shines solo above all else. Yeah, for people wondering, it does have less effective raw than the proper meta longsword set. It does less damage because you specifically trade some stronger damage skills to fit in punishing draw and slugger, but the difference isn't to a point of unusability. This build's effective raw is 360 on a draw attack, 347.4 on non-draw attacks, which is more or less 5% overall damage difference between this build and then the pure attack alternatives that I've seen floating around. So this is still a totally viable build if you are into the gimmick of draw attack stuns, if you are into the idea of being the Slug Punisher. The old version of this build in the last game was called Slug Punishment, but clearly this is the build that was actually doing the punishment because it is just so damn offensively strong, so Slug Punisher. And given how strong Longsword is and how fast it kills things, why would you not explore some slightly alternative playstyles like this one? Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur and this has been our KO Longsword build. Make sure to let us know what you think of this build, especially if you make it and use it yourself, and let us know if you have any ideas for more interesting, less standard builds in the future. I love making the most out of these alternative playstyles, it's just so much fun, so let's really see what we can push to the limits here. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.